happening, everyone? Welcome to the latest edition of the Celtics Talk Podcast. I'm Kyle with Sherrod Blakely and Chris Forsberg, our insiders for NBCSportsBoston.com. Fellas, here we are sitting here at the Celtics practice facility, and we're talking about the number one team in the entire NBA, the Boston Celtics. Best record in the league. Sherrod, you surprised, big fella?
Let me think about that. Hell yeah, I'm surprised. I think even the players on this roster, ownership, management, everyone is surprised that they've got up to such a great start. And I think they're finding ways to win in a lot of different ways, whether it's high-scoring shootouts against teams like the Wizards or just really making plays down the stretch, against some other teams like Toronto, Milwaukee. They're finding ways to be successful, and I think that if you're going to be a championship contender, which I'm not quite ready to hit that button on this team yet, but they're doing all the things that when you're talking about being a contender, you're supposed to.
Podcast title, Sherrod says Celtics are championship contenders.
I know, right?
Then we'll wait for the clip.
That's how it always works. That's the headline, right?
Exactly.
And I think there's still that little bit of trepidation, like, okay, their schedule hasn't been great. They've won ugly. It hasn't been like a dominating fashion. So, I think we'll find out a lot as they go out west what this team is made of. And yet, I think it's fair to be just sort of excited about what you've seen. These were a lot of the games in this stretch have been games they would have lost last year. Like, I think about that Knicks game. And should you be going down to the wire and needing Jason Tatum to hit a game winner? Probably not. Should you be giving up 133 points to the Washington Wizards? Probably not. But you're finding ways to win these games. You feel good about yourself. I think the biggest thing is it feels like there's so much more this team can do. Like, I don't think we've seen them fully healthy. We haven't seen them play their best basketball. Like, we've had halves and quarters. But I want to see this whole thing complete, and I want to see what happens when they do sort of click. Where do they rank in the hierarchy of the NBA at that point?
Well, one of the reasons that they're 9-1 is because the energy, the effort every single night. And my concern is, can you sustain this a full 82? Like, it sort of reminds me of the Bucks a little bit. Last season came out like gangbusters, had this goal of winning 60 games, getting the number one seed. In the dog days of January, February, can they still reach into that tank and have this kind of energy and effort? That's the one thing I want to see, especially as we go out west, too, when the teams get a little tougher.
Well, that's where the Carson Edwards, the Brad Wanamakers, the Daniel Tices, the Vincent Poirier, those types. That's where those guys have to be impactful. And the Wizards game was the first game, I think, this season where they really put a significant imprint on the game. And it wasn't just Carson Edwards getting buckets. I mean, they played 6 guys off the bench. All 6 guys scored. And it wasn't just points that they were able to contribute. Poirier had only, I think, 2 or 3 points, but he set a lot of great screens, and I talked to him about that. He's like, that's what I have to do. I'm having a good game when Kemba Walker is getting open shots, when Jason Tatum is getting open shots off the screens I set. That has to be the blueprint for this team if they're going to get through those rough times, because that's the one thing about this team. They really haven't hit adversity yet. This West Coast trip, I think there will be some of that.
We know it's coming. Health, though. They've been banged up. That's a little bit of adversity,
right? That's not real adversity. Drapes, that's like setback adversity. We're talking like lose 2 or 3 games in a row. You start questioning whether is Kemba the right guy to lead this team? Should we change the lineup up? Okay. What is Brad doing? Yeah. Those type of situations, those type of questions being raised is when adversity strikes, and then we'll find out what this team is made of.
And that's probably coming, right? Like, you look at the start of the West Coast trip, and it's not overly daunting. You get the Golden State, who obviously isn't the same Golden State, Sacramento, who hasn't played up to expectations, and then Phoenix. Second night of a back-to-back.
That's going to be a tough
Aaron
game.
Baines' revenge game. The Suns are playing well. Then you got to go play the Clippers on a national stage. Then you got to go visit Denver on a national stage. So I can see the chance there where they finish this road trip, not great. And so what happens then? And we heard Kemba talk about it last night.
Times like this is kind of when, when you go on road trips, is kind of when, adversity starts to hit. Fatigue starts to set in. Guys want to get back home. Those trips are long, but we're gonna learn a lot about each other. But hopefully, when adversity does hit, we're gonna see how we handle it. I think that's what's the most important thing. And for me, I just want to keep this team together as much as possible. This is a huge stretch for us. Really important, and it's gonna show what we're made of.
he wants to see what happens when they hit adversity. Because it's one thing to be rolling and just feel good about yourself and take advantage of a team like the Wizards who plays no defense whatsoever.
Right.
But what happens once you start losing? You start questioning that a little bit, and then I will know more about this team. Then I'll be ready to decide: are they on the Milwaukee, Philadelphia level? Do they rank up there with the best teams in the West? We'll find out quick.
Yeah, and so much to talk about, so much content from you guys on the My Teams app and NBCSportsBoston.com. But I want to start with some of the individual performances we're seeing. Chris, I know you wrote about Kemba Walker having some King of the Fourth, Mr. IT in him, and it's like clockwork, guys. This quiet first half, 5-7 points, hits a couple of shots. But it's coming, Chris. Kemba is going to deliver in that second half.
Yeah, I think he's 5th in the NBA, 16.4 second half points. I mean, average 16.4 would be a good night for most of these guys, and doing it in the second half is impressive. It does feel like he eases into games sometimes, and not that he's taking bad shots, they just don't seem to fall, but he never gets discouraged by it, and he just was able to move on. I thought the funniest thing, I was talking to Marcus Smart, and I said, so you've had Kemba, you've had IT, you've had Kyrie, it's 3 of the best fourth quarter scorers in the league. And he's like, yeah, I've been kind of spoiled. You just assume those guys are going to step up on the big stage. And so that's been a refreshing thing. Even Kemba against the Wizards didn't have a good fourth quarter, missed a bunch of shots. Then when they pulled within, I think, 7 there or 4 there late, he hits the big three-pointer, puts the game away. You need guys like that. They're going to step up, especially without Hayward out there.
The thing about what Kemba's doing is it seems that him and Jason Tatum kind of have this ebb and flow thing going where Tatum is really good and strong in the first half. Kemba is in takeover mode in the second. And it's great that they, I think, have that unspoken understanding of each other's role. Tatum's going to make some shots in the fourth quarter. He'll do that. But really, when all the chips are in the middle of the table and someone's got to put their hand out, it's going to be Kemba. And everyone understands that. Everyone embraces that. And I think the fact that they're able to work so well together, and you don't really seem to see a lot of, guys stepping over other guys trying to get shots and things like that. I think that's one of the unspoken benefits of this team and just how they're constructed right now.
Has Kemba been better than we expected? I mean, I feel like we're still not talking enough about what this guy is really doing here.
Kemba, if you look at his numbers, this is kind of what he does. The only real significant difference, I think, in his game right now, I think he's a little bit more efficient as far as shooting the ball. He's never going to be a great shooter, but he's in the low to mid 40s as opposed to being high 30s, low 40s before. He's doing a better job rebounding the ball, which I think is, I think is more of a testament to Brad's system than necessarily Kemba. Because when you think about Avery Bradley, when he was here at one point, he was averaging 7-8 rebounds early in the season. So the system, I think, has certainly helped him. But by and large, Kemba's doing what Kemba does. It's just he's got a better surrounding cast, and frankly, he's in a better system that I think really accentuates what he does well.
I do feel bad if we get to the end of the night and it's like, oh, he had 30. Just what Kemba does, we focus a lot.
There, though.
Like last night, Carson Edwards, we were all sitting there, oh my God, what a good job off the bench, 18 points, making comparisons to IT, and understandably so, but Kemba just went out there and did what he does, and I mean, I think that's what's gonna happen is it's just gonna kind of float under the radar throughout the season. Drapes, who do you think has been the most surprising? What's the most surprising aspect of all this winning for you?
Well, obviously defense. I mean, I think, when you lose Al Horford, you lose Aaron Baines, and then you bring in an Enes Kanter, the first question you have is, where's our defense going to come from? And I'm going to give some credit to Kemba defensively, too. I think he's getting it after it defensively. All the guys really are. And so the team defense has been, I guess, the most surprising thing. A couple of individual players. Robert Williams, and I know he's injured, missed the game the other night, but I like what I'm seeing from him. If he plays with that kind of energy we saw in San Antonio, that dude should be out on the floor 20, 25 minutes a game. So, but I think defensively, I didn't expect this team to be among the league leaders defensively.
No, the defense has been definitely a plus. But just when you talk about breaking them down from an individual standpoint, I look at Daniel Tice as really the one guy because I thought that it was just going to be a center by committee all season long where Tice one night, Ennis another night, Robert another night. But Tice has clearly set himself apart from those guys in terms of helping this team get off to good starts, playing the role that he needs to play. He is not going to out-jump Robert Williams. That's just not going to happen. But he's a better leaper than Ennis. He's not going to necessarily outscore Ennis in terms of scoring, but he's probably a better scorer than Robert Williams because Robert, if you take away lobs, he's not giving you much offensively. So he's figured out how to help this team be successful. And the stat that matters more than any other stat is wins. They're 12-0 when Daniel Tice is in the starting lineup. 12-0.
Undefeated, yeah.
Have not lost a single game when he's called among the starters. It counts for something.
That San Antonio game for Robert Williams, I mean, the highlight reel would be like a good season for somebody. But all those dunks, I mean, there's one where he's like 7 feet above LaMarcus Aldridge. He's like literally 14 feet in the air. And I'm like, how is this even possible? The one thing I do worry about is he always has these little injuries. And he's even said it, where availability is the best, availability is the best ability. And he hasn't been able to stay out there. And every time he has an opportunity, like Tice doesn't go last night. And I'm sitting there thinking, all right, here we go. This is going to be a Robert Williams night, a chance to really assert himself, the future starter. And then his ankle flares up. And so I feel bad for him because I feel like, I still don't know if he can shoulder it every night. But I think by the end of the season, he could be a guy that gets in there. He leads the NBA in offensive rating, 122 points per 100 possession when he's on the floor, just ahead of Aaron Baines, which is kind of ironic too. But to me, the biggest difference from this team from this year to last year is Jaylen Brown. And the way the confidence he's playing with, the ball handling, the vision he showed. Like, these are things we didn't see in years past. We knew he could drive to the basket, but he would sometimes lose the ball, didn't make the best decisions. Feels like this year he's just a completely different player. And I'm fascinated to watch. One of the questions in my mailbag was, is Jaylen Brown an all-star? And at first I was like, no, that's not. But then I started thinking about it.
Well,
and who's playing better right now, Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum?
Jaylen Brown is. I would.
So is he the second All-Star? If you had to pick All-Stars today, would he be the Celtics' second representative?
He should be, but he won't.
He won't because you got to understand. The coaches are going to vote for it, and I think Tatum has more of a name recognition.
But if you're Brad Stevens and I know you can't vote for your own guy.
Yeah,
but wouldn't you think you would look at the stat line? Like, I know I'm going cross-conference here, but if I'm Greg Popovich, the one. I'm probably leaning more towards Jaylen Brown. And he coached all those guys. He knows all their potential. Like, listen, if Jason Tatum goes out and has what we think Jason Tatum will do and score big numbers for the remainder of this time that Gordon Hayward is out, I think it's obvious. I thought going into the year, Kemba and Jason Tatum were the most likely All-Stars. I think it's going to be hard for the team to get 3, given that there is some talent in the East, especially at that forward position. I think Jalen's making a really decent case for it right now.
Saying that, Chris, after he's scoring 30 and 25, of course.
But even last night he had a great night.
But the one thing that Jaylen is doing, and I give him a lot of credit for this, he's reaping the benefits of playing with Kemba Walker and Jason Tatum. They're getting a bulk of the attention. And to his credit, he's wise enough to find spots where he can impact the game. And I think that's why coaches, when it comes to picking Tatum over Brown, will probably go with Tatum only because he's already generating more attention. And statistically speaking, there really isn't a significant difference between the two. And maybe most important, Tatum has shown a little bit more consistency to being an elite player, whereas Jaylen Brown, he's had a couple of really good games. But I don't think anyone would agree that he's had this long track record of being an elite all-star caliber talent.
Yeah, and
it's a
with
great
the
problem to have. Though.
Yeah, it is. And with the Gordon Hayward injury, and you know what? If they continue to be the top team in the Eastern Conference,
they'll get more than 3.
Yeah, they might get 3,
yeah.
Chris. I know there's some competition out there.
Think about it though. Siakam, Giannis, Jimmy Butler. Blake Griffin, now that he's healthy. Oh my! Are you guys serious right now?
Detroit's done.
Sleeping on Blake.
No, Blake is sleeping all season long. The Pistons are sleeping on actual regular season. That's why Blake won't get in. He will not get in this year.
I did the math. I started counting it out. I was surprised by how many players. Because then you start getting down to like the Indianas of the world. They probably deserve one. So do you put Brogdon on there? Do you put Sabonis on there? It's going to be a lot of guys crowding for those final forward spots, and I just think it's going to be tough for guys to get on there.
The thing that the coaches normally do, though, they reward success. I mean, if the Celtics find a way to have the best record in the East and they have a pretty decent cushion with that, they're going to get 3.
Yeah,
they're going to get 3.
All right, so here the Celtics are atop the standings, and I've been listening to this Kyrie bashing, guys, for the last several weeks, and we cannot just point to, Kyrie's not here, that's why everything is going well. I think there's so much going into it.
But it's part of it, right?
It's part of it, no doubt about it. But think about it. If you're Jaylen Brown and you start last season and Brad Stevens says Gordon Hayward's going to be the starter right from day one, what does that do for you? This year, Jaylen knows his role right from the get-go. And number 2, these guys are getting more opportunities. Gordon Hayward this year, a completely different player than he was last year. So, Kyrie is part of it. I'll give Kyrie 50%. But there's some other things that have transpired with this team that makes them as good as they are.
Well, I mean, you've got the other players, and you also have Brad Stevens. I mean, I think Brad has done a phenomenal job this year and deserves a lot of credit for their success, just like I thought Brad did not do a great job last year and deserves some of the blame for the struggles this team had. It's right now, everything is just coming up 7-11 for these guys. I mean, guys are having great seasons. Brad is pushing all the right buttons. When I think about the center position and just how close Tice and Robert and Ennis were, take Ennis out because he was injured. Brad knew when to go with Tice. And then you look at, Poirier, who doesn't play much, but he plays a couple minutes and actually does some really good things. Carson Edwards, you start going down the line, he's getting everyone in the right position at the right time to make an impact. But at the end of the day, the players are getting it done. And the players, I think, are playing with a consistent chip on their shoulder because of all that went wrong last season with Kyrie and all the other nonsense.
Well, it's unfair to pin all the blame on Kyrie. I do think you can look at this offense, which I think now is probably the top offense in the NBA after 140 points against the Wizards. And there is something to the idea of when Kemba is more willing to give the ball up, all of a sudden Jalen's not sitting in the corner waiting for the guy to pound the ball into the ground for 20 seconds and then taking a quick kick and either just launching a three or not getting really able to showcase his skill set. So there's just more freedom for everybody this year. And I think we're seeing that. Now, some of it's just development. Like Jalen's doing things he couldn't do last year. Right. Jason Tatum's taking better shots. There's a lot more that goes into it than necessarily just Kyrie. But the way this team is constructed, they're just so much better suited to accentuate these guys' strengths now with someone who's more deferential like Kemba, who seems to pick his spots. Like when he's got the hot hand, we saw that whole thing when Jalen was, took the bad shot and everyone was like, come on, what are you doing? We got to feed Kemba. There's those moments when you want him to be greedy. But there are times also where I just feel like, whereas instead of just bringing the ball all the way up the court and pounding it and dribbling around and coming off a pick and probing, he's just like, hey, there's the easy play, and the ball moves, and you find the right shot.
And the one stat that I think really speaks to that more than anything other is drives. Last year, Kyrie was the only guy that was in double digits in drives. This year, they've had 3 or 4 guys averaging 10 or more drives per game all season long, and if they stay along those lines, it makes them so much more difficult to defend because you don't know where the attack is coming from. And when the attack does come, you have competent shooters on the perimeter who can knock down shots, including my guy, Marcus Smart.
How have we not been talking about Smart? Smart might be my second.
I'm telling you.
Right
No, Smart has been the man. I mean, he's knocking down the threes like you said.
6th
but
all time, Drapes.
but-
in franchise
Come
history,
on, bro.
only 5 guys
Come
in
on,
Celtics
bro.
history have
Come
made
on.
more threes
Come
than
on, bro.
Marcus Smart.
Kemba might be 6 by the end of the year.
Right. The way Kemba shoot, But give Brad credit because he's obviously preached to these guys, we got to drive the ball. I mean, last year it felt like they were always dribble, shoot a three or something, And so they've made a conscious effort this year to get into the paint, to drive, not always to shoot necessarily. Right. But I also will say with their centers, especially Tice and Time Lord, they have something they haven't had. Like they've had more lob plays, above the rim kind of plays this year than in previous years that I can remember. And that's not Al's game, right? Al may have done it a couple of times, but I feel like that opens up so much else when you have a guy like a Robert Williams or a guy like a Tice rolling to the rim that really puts the pressure on the defense, and so that's opening things up offensively for this team.
And one of the things that I know a lot of them do this year, I think more than I've ever seen them do, is they get defenders on their hips, and they're either looking to float it up or throwing a lob. And it puts
everybody's doing that, right?
But it puts your defense in such a tough spot because if the defender comes up on the ball handler, there goes a lob, and if you stay back, you're going to shoot the floater. It's a devastating play, and I watched Kemba before games. He spends a good 15 minutes working on that specific move. Get a guy on his hip, get into the paint, float it up there.
It's funny because the Celtics were always such a bad team at throwing lobs. Like Rozier threw a couple that seemed to sail over the backboard. Still our guy.
Still traveling.
But, I don't think they've improved their lob throwing. It's just that with a healthier Tice, he can go up and get those balls. Robert Williams, like Javonte Green was joking with me the other day. He said in that one in San Antonio, he just kind of threw it up and he didn't realize how bad it was, like how high he'd thrown it, but Time Lord went up and got it and just dunked it down. And so that's a luxury. And Marcus Smart said, you almost have to tell yourself, don't throw the lob on every play because you feel like there's this ability to do it. And so they've found the right balance though. 3-pointers, lobs, everything at the rim. Their shot profile is so much better than a year ago.
7-11. All right, so they got this West Coast trip coming up, right? 3-2 is a good trip, would you say? I think 3-2, you come back, I'm okay with that.
3-2.
2-3.
2-3 would be not that shocking. When you think about how well they played, you think about just the basketball guys have a way of balancing things out. That Knicks game, for example, that they won, you're probably going to lose a game you probably should win in reverse. So I think the Celtics 2-3, I think it should be acceptable, but I think they're going to come back 4-1. I think they're listen. I
So
think
they're beating the Clippers in Denver. They're beating one of them.
they're going to be one of them. Yeah. I think they'll be Clippers.
There better be some load management if they're winning that.
Well, and that's the beautiful thing about the Clippers. When you play them, you know that just looking at their schedule, you can kind of gauge whether or not
somebody's going to be out.
Someone's going to be out. So
I think there's no reason they should lose the first 2 games. The Warriors are just like atrocious defensively right now. We know how banged up they are. They should win that one. Sacramento, no Fox, he's injured. Like I feel like that's a very winnable game. You know, if you can avoid the stumbles, then you're 2-0 at the start. Maybe you got some momentum. I do think that Phoenix game is really tough.
Yeah.
Back-to-back, longerish trip for a back-to-back, and they've got to figure that one out. Then I'll be interested to see. Like, they should be up for the Clippers. They should be up for Denver. But I keep thinking back to Denver. You know, Kyrie tossing the ball in the stands with Jamal Murray going big game. They don't seem to play well there. And so I can see them stumbling at the end of the trip. So they better stockpile wins while they can.
Yeah, I agree. And that brings me to Sherrod's power rankings, which just dropped on Thursday. And Sherrod, I looked at your power rankings that you can see on NBCSportsBoston.com. Celtics 1, I'm okay with that.
Right.
Lakers 2, I'm even okay with that. You know, some of the issues I have is sort of in the middle of the pack.
Which is jumbled up
Yeah,
right
it's
now.
jumbled up right now. But any surprises, I guess, early on in your power rankings?
The team that has been the biggest surprise for me has been Utah. Because they're an elite team defensively. They have been for years. But their offense is brutal.
Yeah.
And yet there they are still finding ways to win games, which says a lot more about how elite their defense is than it does anything else. The fact that they've been able to manufacture wins, quality wins so early, that's been a pleasant surprise. And Phoenix is the other one.
Yeah, Phoenix, you know, I think you got them in the top 10, do you?
Yeah, I believe so.
Ooh, the Phoenix Suns. Give Monty Williams credit out there.
Philadelphia and Milwaukee.
Philadelphia's in the top 10.
No,
They're like
I got to
seven-
pull it up
they're like
here,
7
dude,
or 8.
because, yeah, you
That
got
might
them
be
at
low.
7.
Phil, this is the thing about load management. If you're going to do it, you have to win those games when your best players don't play. If you're trying to do what Toronto did with Kawhi, and Philly hasn't do that. When Embiid doesn't play, they don't play. It's almost as if when he decides to kick back and relax, the other 14 guys on the roster say, yeah, if he can do it, it's good for him, it's good for us too. They have to figure out a way to win when they decide to rest him.
Yeah, I agree. They had a bad loss last night
Yeah.
against Orlando, getting blown out like
Getting
that.
smashed.
Yeah.
I was going to say, like, Milwaukee, now without Middleton for a few weeks, I wonder how they'll survive. But, like, I mean, Giannis has just been absurd. I probably discounted how good he would be this year. So, I don't know. Like, Celtics being at 1 and we're 12% of the way through the season does surprise me, but they've earned it. 9-1 is 9-1.
Yeah, they've earned it, no doubt. I'm looking at your power rankings. You got Indiana at number 12, and
They're on the rise.
they're on the rise.
And
That's
the reason
what-
why I didn't have them higher is because they're beating bad teams. They had a stretch.
I mean,
Drapes, hear me out. They're beating bad teams, which is good for them because they got off to a slow start. But they're coming up on a stretch now where they're playing better opponents. And so once we see them against quality teams, now that they got some wins under their belt, let's see what they can do.
Can I ask you guys one thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
What did you think of IT last night?
Oh, IT?
It was okay.
He's okay. What did he score? 18, I think
18
it
points,
was?
7 for 14,
But
5
he's not
dunks.
moving like the IT we saw in Boston.
I don't know if he will get back to moving
He's
that
a
way.
different player. He had trouble blowing by, you know.
He had switched on to Cantor at one point.
Yeah, and couldn't get by
listen,
Cantor.
Cantor's my guy. Subscribe to the
nah,
Cantor Show
this guy.
podcast. But like he should. I mean, that's a matchup that back in the day, like boom, he's just gone. And I don't know. It's a little. I'm rooting for the little guy. Like I think we all sit here and want him to do well, but man, it sure feels like he's just not the same player. Doesn't have that same burst. I felt bad. Like I mean. Man, it was just 2 years ago that he was like terrorizing the league and trying to back up that Brinks truck. I hope he finds it. I hope it's just like a matter of getting himself back into that game shape. But you could tell he's almost frustrated at his own body that it just can't do what it used to do.
Yeah, and that's the frustrating part for him is that there's what the mind wants to do, and then your body's like, nah, dude, we ain't doing that today. And he understands it's a process because the way, and we talked about it earlier, the way he sees it, it took him a really long time to get to where he was an all-star.
Right.
And so for him to get back, he just knows it's going to take a long time, particularly when you've spent basically 2 years hurt. Last summer was the first time in 2 seasons where he was actually able to get better. And he talked about that, about how, the worst part about being out with his type of injury was that you couldn't do anything to improve your game. So he came back the same player he was 2 years ago. And that's something that for someone who has steadily improved his game 1 year to the next, it's going to take you some time to get back. I thought he was pretty good considering he's just a shell
He
of
can still
himself.
make shots.
Right.
I mean, that's
Right.
one thing
Yeah.
that'll never leave. It's just,
Right.
I start thinking about after this season, like, where does he go? What is he on a contender? Is he a sixth man, a seventh man, an eighth man?
I would love him coming off the bench.
What is it, special?
Celtics had a chance. Like,
Yeah, but Carson Edwards, a little more
well, that's the
upside.
thing.
Yeah.
You've got a younger version now, and that's unfortunate. But I hope he finds that sort of what he found before, and it's all about situation for him. But this is the chance to really reestablish himself. Good to see him putting up numbers. Now, the next step is just getting back into that explosion, and hopefully he can find it.
Yeah. All right. So I'm looking at the rundown Chris Forsberg put together.
Yeah.
Producer credit
Thank you.
here.
Thank you. Did I get everything?
Anything you want to get to before we get to the My Guy of the Week? 'Cause
Ooh.
I do like that.
See?
I do like that.
Oh, so
No,
now you're cool with producer
No, because,
Forsberg.
dude, I've been saying My Guy for 5 years. Everybody been clowning me. Now everybody says My Guy.
I have one thing on my.
I'm
on
gonna
my
trademark that, like Taco Tuesday.
You might
me
have
and
to hear from an
LeBron.
attorney if you trademark that. I'm just letting you know that. 'Cause you do got film that goes back more than 5 years,
Okay,
bro.
all
Just
right,
let you know.
I have one more thing on my rundown.
Yeah, what you got, what
that
you
we
got?
didn't get to. One of the questions in the mailbag was, do the Celtics need a big man? Because this is something I've heard, even before the preseason and with all the uncertainty in that front court. Are you okay with the potential of the development of Robert Williams and all these guys, or do you think eventually, looking ahead to the playoffs, needing someone to go against Embiid, someone to go against Giannis, that they need a legitimate big man? And is there one out there?
Well, see, to me, that's the question. Is there one out there that you
Right,
can bring
right.
into the fold? You hear names like Steven Adams and Clint Capella, who all would be great from a talent standpoint,
Right.
but then you start looking at the price tag and what you'd have to give up to get them.
Yeah,
It just
right.
doesn't make a lot of sense.
Tristan Thompson's name comes up all the time, but I
Same-
know these
same
guys are going to
issue.
be available. It's just, you're not going to give up a Marcus Smart to get a Tristan
Right,
Thompson.
right,
You're not
that's-
going to give up Gordon Hayward to go get a Steven Adams. It's just, I don't see a move out there that makes a lot of sense. And the other thing is, everyone keeps asking me, like, what are they going to do to get Baines back?
Phoenix is
They
not
can't.
giving up Baines.
They can't. Baines would have to be traded to another team before they even think about it. But
Baines is the starter for Phoenix right now with DeAndre A. Now they love Aaron
They love
Baines
Aaron
out there
Baines,
in
yeah.
Phoenix, and so
More than they thought they would.
Yeah, yeah.
But that was not. This was not the plan.
Right.
When Aaron Baines was
got
traded, to
traded,
Phoenix.
right?
it worked out well for everybody.
It worked out well for everyone, but let's be clear, Phoenix. Much love to the Suns and what you're doing, but look, y'all lucked into this one.
Yeah,
and you know it.
So
know it.
to answer Chris's question, do they need a big man? I don't think they want a big man, sure, but I don't see it happening. And let's look at the landscape of the Eastern Conference. Who do you need a big man against? The Sixers. I think that's where it really hurts you not having somebody that can guard Embiid. And although I thought Cantor did a solid job
He did.
in opening night, I think that's where it's going to hurt you. But other teams, I'm not
But
too
Giannis,
worried
you need
about.
someone sort of the stout in the middle to build that wall, prevent him from going at the basket. I do think, if it's one thing, like Celtics are well situated to get past that first round, but
Yeah.
then I looked at second round. I'm like, how do you do 7 games against Giannis or Embiid? You can't deploy Marcus Smart every night
Right,
and expect
right.
that he'll help you out, but do they need another big? To me, maybe the biggest part of the season is, can either Tice learn to go with those guys and joust with them, or can Robert Williams develop enough to be part of that mix? And I just don't know yet.
Or can the Celtics continue to junk up the game defensively to frustrate Giannis, to keep him from being impacted, to force him to rely on his teammates? Because I thought in the game that the Celtics won earlier this year, I thought that was the real big issue. Giannis was a very willing passer. And unfortunately, he did not have willing shot makers around him, and that's what killed him.
Yeah.
If he is looking to be more aggressive, more assertive offensively, that's a problem for the Celtics, because I just don't think they have enough bodies to form that wall. I mean, Shimi Ojeleye is going to have to be multiplied times 2 or 3 if you're going to have, and hopefully Robert, or Grant Williams can maybe evolve and be a guy that can give you some resistance there.
Shemi, Grant, and Carson's thighs. I don't think anyone gets past. Anyone gets past that wall.
But the problem with Giannis is he can kind of go over. those guys.
Right. He could go over those
So
guys.
you got the low wall, but you got Giannis torn.
All right, set this up, Drape. My guy of the week.
My guy of the week. This is a take on Drape's guy, my guy. I created that.
My attorney's
we're-
gonna love this.
We're going to start that out here on the Celtics Talk Podcast. Sherrod, your guy of the week. Who you got?
Easy, Daniel Tice.
What?
And I'm gonna tell you.
How is that easy?
I'm gonna tell you why. First and foremost, every single game he's played, he's won. And the last game he played, hear me out. The last game he played had a dislocated finger, which he popped back in, dislocated it again, and popped it back again. Same game. That's my guy.
I'm going with Jaylen Brown. This is an easy choice. The 30 in San Antonio, 25 coming back. He's been really, really good. If you could bottle up this Jaylen Brown, I do believe he's an all-star. I keep saying it. I don't want to compare him to Kawhi Leonard, but if you look at the stat lines at the same age, it's crazy how similar they are. Kawhi's a much better defensive player, and you need to get the consistency out of Jaylen on that end. But the way he is playing, the aggressiveness that he's driving to the hoop with, his ability to finish, his increasing distribution skills, he is on a path to stardom. And all of a sudden, I don't hear a single damn person complaining about that extension. My guy.
All right. I'm going to go with my guy, Marcus Smart. How about that? And I'll tell you why, Sherrod. Not
Please, tell
only
me about my
let
guy,
me
but
school
go ahead.
you on Marcus Smart.
Okay.
I'll go back to the San Antonio game.
Okay.
Coming off the bench, what does he do? Hits 3 threes, 3 early threes. Okay. So he did it offensively. We go to the Washington game. What did he do? Block Mo Wagner a couple of times at the rim. This guy is a Swiss Army knife. Whatever you need, he will provide. He is the heart and soul of the team. And you know what? I know people complain about him taking threes. His threes actually look good. I don't know if they are anymore.
Still complaining?
I hope not, because
not.
his threes look great right now.
He's like a
he's in
two-year-old
such
problem.
I know he's in such a rhythm. He's shooting it well. Marcus Smart, to me, is the heart and soul of the team. Whatever they need, he's providing.
And he's wearing robes now, which are
And
great.
he got the robes.
Stay
He got
tuned
his
for
new
that feature
Puma
on
deal also.
NBCSportsBoston.com.
So Marcus Smart, my guy of the week. All right, fellas.
Marcus knows better.
I
Keep
know.
going.
So we got
I really do.
this road trip coming up. Sherrod, you stand back? Or what?
Yes.
Hold it down, big fella. Me and Chris will be out west in
Keep your
LA.
shovel
chilling.
handy.
Exactly. I'll call you from Beverly Hills or wherever we're
Payback.
staying.
Karma.
All right, let's get out of
Goes
here, man.
around.
That'll do it for this week's Celtics Talk Podcast. Make sure you hit us up on all the social media channels. You can also subscribe and like this podcast on all your favorite podcasting apps. Go out there and leave a review also. Hey, Sherrod Blakely, Chris Forsberg. I'm Kyle Draper. We'll see you next time on the Celtics Talk Podcast.